Welcome back to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, checking in from North Carolina, and joining me this week are Shane Joseph.
Hello, everybody. What's going on?
And Eric Woolley out in California.
Hey, Andrew. Hey, Shane. How you doing?
Doing well. I'm going to start this episode of the podcast with our brand new-ish segment called the Get to Know the Podcast, which has a very creative name. We got a question this week from Twitter user We Want Ringo 73, and We Want Ringo 73 wants to know, what was your first roller coaster? And Eric, I'll start with you.
So mine was, I'm pretty sure, not positive, but I think it was the kiddie coaster at my home park growing up, California's Great America, which at the time was Paramount's Great America. It may have still been Marriott even back then. It was Blue Streak, which is now Woodstock Express, and it had different names in between, as Andrew, I know you know, growing up around Carowinds, going through various licenses with Nickelodeon and Smurfs before that, and now Peanuts. So now Woodstock Express. It is an Intamin kiddie coaster. So I'm a fan of it. Love most Intamin rides.
Sure. Take it, Eric. You can have it.
I have only ridden it once as an adult, and it was all right. It was definitely hard to fit into as even a average size person.
Shane, what about you?
I would guess same thing. Like, my home park growing up was Six Flags New England, so I was gonna say the Great Chase, which is their real kiddie coaster, like 10 feet tall, whatever. But I don't think I ever rode that when I was a kid. So I think my first one was Catwoman's Whip at Six Flags New England, which is one of those zero tire powered double figure eight coasters. I don't think I was really into the coasters as much until I was a little older, maybe like 10. So I think that I would skip the real kiddie one, but I definitely have memories of going on that one. So I would be comfortable saying that was my first coaster.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was kind of like you, Shane. Like, I didn't get into coasters. I was actually kind of scared of coasters when I was a young kid. I had a grandmother who lived in St. Petersburg, Florida at the time, so we went to Busch Gardens, and I can't remember the trip. I know it was sometime in the mid-90s, but my first coaster would have either been Scorpion, I believe it's a Schwarzkopf looping coaster, or Python, which is the Aero corkscrew that is now, it no longer exists, but the trains live on at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, on Loch Ness Monster. Huh. So it's one of the two of those. I don't know which. And that's just what I tell people, so we'll go with those.
You started with a full adult roller coaster, not a kiddie coaster, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a chance that I had a ride on Thunder Mountain. I don't think I would have ridden Space Mountain as a kid, but I can't remember the first time I rode those, so it's just easier to pick the one of the two at Busch Gardens, Tampa.
Fair enough.
So, on the site recently, I don't know if anybody's been following along. We've been doing a lot of lists. There's not a lot going on at parks right now. There's some news, but you can only rewrite the same press release that, yes, we have dots on the floor and hand sanitizer in the station so many times. But we've been working on some lists that are, the oldest coaster in the alphabet and the oldest coaster in each state. And we wanted to focus this week kind of on that oldest coaster in each state list, just to kind of highlight some of our riding experiences, obviously coming from 3 different parts of the country. We've all had various travels to different places, and just to kind of, highlight that list, we just wanted to kind of go through the different states and the oldest coasters in them. But Eric, I'll ask you, what's the oldest coaster you've been on?
Oh, that is a very good question. I think that the oldest coaster that I've been on is probably Jackrabbit, which is 100 years old. Jackrabbit at Kennywood, which I know you have also ridden. I think we rode it together for the first time, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the oldest I've been on. I've also been on a few other 50-year-old coasters that we, I think we're going to get into later in the episode, some of our favorite over 50 coasters, which was a list that we actually put out last year. But yeah, I think Jackrabbit is the oldest and is currently my only 100-year-old coaster, although there might be some others that I've forgotten are older than that, which maybe you'll remind me shortly.
Could be. Shane, what about you? Oldest roller coaster?
Oldest roller coaster I've been on is Thunderhawk at Dorney Park in Pennsylvania. That was in 1924, so a couple more years and that'll be 100. I can also say that is probably the worst roller coaster I've ever been on. It was pretty bad. I can't say that I would recommend it, but just for the history part alone, I would say I liked it. And then another old one I've ridden is Yankee Cannonball at Canobie Lake Park in New Hampshire. That was 1936, so still pretty old. It just, again, same thing. You know, it's rough. I like a rough coaster, but this is not to the extent that a chiropractor is necessary. So, you know, some of these really old wooden coasters just don't really sit right with me when there's too much, when the car is like shaking off the tracks.
Shane, when did you go to Dorney? Because I was there 2 years ago, and I don't remember Thunderhawk was definitely not like smooth, but I don't remember it being particularly painful.
I went last summer, so about a year ago. I also Wildcat at Lake Compounds. Actually, you know what? That was 1927. That's the worst coaster I've ever been on. So both of those, Yankee Cannonball I liked though. Yankee Cannonball is good. The other two, you know, just maybe keep the history and do a quick retract. That's all.
I also went to Dorney a couple years ago, and I remember enjoying Thunderhawk. So I don't. You might have caught it on a bad day.
Maybe,
Shane.
you know what? Yeah, maybe I did. I think I caught it on a bad day. Because
it could also be one of those things, depending on like how close you are to when they last did some track maintenance on it.
Yeah,
makes a big difference on old wooden rides. So, Andrew, where are your oldest?
So I've ridden Wild One at Six Flags America. It was not originally there, but it opened in 1917 and then was transported to the park, I believe, in the 80s. But the oldest in one location is, as you mentioned, Eric, it's Jackrabbit, celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. That first ride I had was in the back row. Going over that double down, I nearly came out of my seat. Remains one of my favorite wooden coasters to this day for that reason.
And now you have reminded me, as I thought you would, I have also been on Wild One and did not remember that it was originally 1917. But same thing, Jackrabbit, one location. That's what really counts, right?
Exactly. And obviously on that list that John put together, and he spent a lot of time curating that list, how many of the states have you guys been able to cross off your list? Shane, I'll start with you.
I've only been to a few. I have been on, like I just said, Wildcat at Lake Compounds, which is in Connecticut. I have been on Space Mountain at Disney World in Florida, which, you know, that was 70s, so Florida doesn't really have a lot of old coasters anymore, probably because wooden coasters don't do too great in the Florida heat, so they can't really have those kind of old woodies that we have, you know, up here on the East Coast up north or Pennsylvania. I've also...
It's also swampland for years.
Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly. Just with the humidity and the swamps, wooden coasters don't do great in Florida, as we can see, unless they're like at Fun Spot or something and built on concrete. I've also been on Thunderbolt, Six Flags New England in Massachusetts. That was 40s, I think 43 or 47 or something. So that's a really good ride. I do really enjoy that one. And then New Hampshire with Yankee Cannonball, like I said before.
Gotcha. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, so from the list of oldest in each state, I've been on 10 of them. A bunch of the ones that we already mentioned, I don't know if we need to go through all of them, but my home state, Giant Dipper at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, which is also one of my favorites. Overlapping with Shane, Space Mountain, Florida. A couple of the sort of not actually very oldest ones. They're in the middle, and a Thunder Run at Kentucky is surprisingly the oldest, even though it's from the early 90s. And then a few others, but 10 total, which I think overlapping a bunch with yours as well, Andrew.
Yeah. So I've crossed off 12 states, and I missed the 13th state by a year. I've ridden the San Diego version of the Giant Dipper at Belmont Park, which opened in 1925, a year after the Santa Cruz Giant Dipper. Others on this list that have not been mentioned, the Dahlonega Mine Train. I think you have to be from Georgia to be able to pronounce that word correctly. So
I've never even heard of it.
Is it over Georgia?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It's an arrow mine train. So it's
never heard of that one before either.
Believe the 60s. That's one of the two in Georgia that are still operating that opened that year. And then I've been to been on the Swamp Fox at Family Kingdom in Myrtle Beach. The Carolina Gold Rusher. I know, Eric, you've done that one with me. Yep. And then Woodstock Express at King's Dominion. That's the oldest in Virginia. So and I got to give a quick shout out to Tigger at Indiana Beach. It's a
Schwarzkopf, yeah.
It's a Schwarzkopf, that jumbo jet. That ride was just insane. And, it was the safest I've ever been while feeling completely unsafe.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a good transition to we want to talk about some of our favorites from these lists that we've been on. I think Tigger is probably one of my favorites of the oldest in its state that we've done.
I always thought it was Tiger. Is that how you?
Well, it's got it's isn't it spelled the way like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh is spelled? It's got
that's what I was going to say.
And some extra R's, I think.
I feel like Disney would be all over that if that was.
Well,
they don't have they left out the letter, so they
left out the letter. I'm a huge Schwarzkopf fan. I don't think that I've ever been on one that I haven't enjoyed. We just recently put out our list of best roller coasters from the 70s that includes a bunch of Schwarzkopf rides. So Tigger, same feeling as you, Andrew. And I think it might be the only of that model that's certainly still in the U.S. I think it's the only of that model, but a very sort of out of control feeling ride, but has that it's fun without being crazy intense, right?
I remember coming off that drop, and it's not a super steep drop, but you come down and you hit this bank turn at full speed, and you go complete bank. You're just like, oh gosh, I'm gonna die.
And piling as many of us into one of the little 2-car trains as possible.
I think what did we do? We ended up with four of us in one of the.
4 of us. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what were we thinking? I really want to highlight a couple coasters on my list that I've been on. The Swamp Fox at Family Kingdom. Myrtle Beach is a place that has a reputation that's not very good, depending on where you live. I mean, some people in the Midwest love it. It's kind of got just a so-and-so or so-so reputation. But I was really surprised by Swamp Fox when I rode it several years ago. It's got this beautiful view of the Atlantic Ocean as you're ascending the lift hill that I'm sure was a lot better when it opened in the 60s. There weren't high-rise hotels or a water park that had been built in its place. And obviously it was demolished by Hurricane Hugo in the 80s and rebuilt, so there's some staying power there, which is nice to hear. And Family Kingdom is still one of the very few seaside parks, especially south of Maryland and New Jersey. So it's the only seaside amusement park in Myrtle Beach, and it's a fun park. Also want to give shout outs to the Carolina Gold Rusher, which opened in 1973. It's one of the few remaining opening day attractions at Carowinds. It's now named, the fictional mining company is named the J.R. Helms Mining Company, which is after the longtime VP of Operations, Jerry Helms. And I've talked to Jerry a couple of times for some features I've written. That guy is super interesting, so I will always associate him with Gold Rusher, which makes me like that ride even more. You can't really beat the the restraints that lock all three rows at one time. So if you happen to be in a car with a person of larger body dimensions, you're going to be in there pretty loose. And the last one I want to talk about real quick is the Woodstock Express in King's Dominion. I think all of those, the miniature wooden Woodstock Express, I believe they're all called that now, at the former Paramount Park. So Carowinds, Kings Island, King's Dominion. For such a small roller coaster, I know they actually pack quite a punch and they're really enjoyable. They've got some, sneaky airtime, which are really good. And I know the one at Carowinds, I know it's not mentioned here because it opened later, but I know they put a lot of work into it this off season to kind of reprofile the turns. And I always like taking people who go to Carowinds for the first time. I always like taking people on the Woodstock Express, just because of how kind of, like I said, sneaky fun it is.
Nice. If any listeners want to learn more about some of those, I know that Swamp Fox was highlighted back a few years ago when we were doing one of our Coaster of the Week A to Z series. So there's some deeper dives on Swamp Fox people can find on the website, because that is
also a small park showcase that was expertly written, I think, back in 2015.
Have you read it since then?
Okay, maybe it wasn't expertly written, but I was proud of it, okay?
Nice. But yes, that's one that I like. Until knowing you and reading about it on our site, I would have known nothing about it, because my view of Myrtle Beach is kind of what you said, the more modern, less pleasant seaside park view of it. So now if I'm ever that direction now, I'll have to make a detour to go try Swamp Fox.
Shane, you have any favorites from your list?
Yeah, like I said before, Thunderbolt at Six Flags New England is really great. I think it's a standout at that park for sure. It's kind of slept on, I think, when people are thinking about the park, but it's just a lot of fun. It's got the same energy as some of those other ones like Wildcat or Thunderhawk, but it's not, it's just old enough where it hasn't quite gotten to it totally beats you up, but there's just enough there for you where it's you can, it's rough but fun. It can still be enjoyable. The layout's great. The airtime still, holds up all these years later. So that's a really enjoyable one for me. I always try to ride that one at the park. Space Mountain is, we've all, I think all three of us ridden that one. It's, pretty janky, not as good as the Disneyland one. Eric, you might be able to weigh in on that. I haven't been there, but from what I hear, it's not as good as in California, but it's still fun just for the theming, and it's a Disney, it's a classic ride, everybody knows it. And Yankee Cannonball at Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire, like I mentioned before, is great. That one, though, they've just got it's not even the Buzz Bar, it's something like Comet at Hershey Park has it, where it's one bar that goes across, and no matter how tall or whatever you are, that there's only so far that bar can go down. So even me, 6 feet tall, I still have room on that bar. And even more so than at Hershey, Yankee Cannonball, I could probably stand up on that ride. That was almost frightening. I was like, all right, this shouldn't be allowed. But I think it personally, I think that kind of adds to the fun of it, that thrill enough where you're like, all right, well, plausibly I could fly out of this, but it's just enough there to keep you in. So I think I don't remember riding it much about the ride experience itself, but I definitely remember those restraints. So I think I had fun on it.
That the Thunderbolt at Six Flags New England, that was moved from another park, like Lakeside Park or something like that. Is that correct?
I think it was, because Six Flags New England was originally Riverside Park.
Riverside, that's what I'm thinking of. The Thunderbolt was one of the ones I'm most looking forward to, and hopefully can get to sometime soon. And I was actually really looking forward to riding Wildcat at Lake Compounce until I heard your review, Shane.
Yeah, so, don't be.
Okay.
I mean, still go, because
you might have
Boulder
higher
Dash.
tolerance than Shane.
That's true. Yeah, if you liked Thunderhawk at Dorney, you're gonna love this one. So, And also Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds. That just for that alone, you should go.
Gotcha. Eric, I jumped ahead a little bit, but do you have any favorites that you've been on from that list?
One's on the list. I always have to give lots of love to my sort of local park, Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and the Giant Dipper. It is, for at least my entire life, it has always been a good roller coaster, so it doesn't seem to have maintenance problems, even though it's pushing 100 years old. 96 now, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a really well-designed roller coaster it's got lots of fun, unexpected elements, and it is always relatively smooth, and it has a gorgeous view over the beach of the Pacific Ocean. It is, I think it's very reasonable that it sort of still, even now, consistently kind of lands on lists of best wooden roller coasters, or at least top 25-ish. The other one that I think worth mentioning, Blazing Fury at Dollywood. This is also partly as a shout out because I know John, our founder, loves it. But it's a fun sort of, you've been on it, right, Andrew?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like sort of a hybrid dark ride roller coaster almost, that kind of, it makes for a very fun experience. We have a great, John did a great like behind the scenes tour of it, I think maybe last year or 2 years ago.
Right.
So it was a very good write-up and behind-the-scenes look at it. But it's a very unique ride that I think sort of makes it stand out, especially when like most of the things on this list are either really old wooden coasters or not very old, kind of 70s and 80s. Like, so it's semi-modern steel coasters, and Blazing Fury kind of stands out to me as like this strange, unique thing.
Kind of in that, you've got your favorites that you have visited. What are some that you haven't visited that are on that list that you want to check off your list?
For me, I think the biggest one is maybe Leap the Dips in Pennsylvania at Lakemont Park, right?
Yep.
And that I think is the oldest roller coaster anywhere. Certainly the oldest in the United States. It's 1902, I think. So that, I think, just for the historic aspect of it would be really fun to go check out.
I'm with you there. I was up in Western Pennsylvania last year, and I purposefully flew in a day early before I was supposed to go to Kennywood, and my options were to go north and go to Waldameer and Conneaut Lake, or to go east, and Lakemont Park was on that list, and Del Grosso's, and there was one other park. Idlewild was on that list. I decided to go north mainly because Leap the Dips was closed, and at Idlewild, they had like a weight limit per row on the Rolo coaster, so it made it a lot easier of a decision with those two coasters there. But yeah, Leap the Dips is one that's on my list for sure. Obviously, it's one of the remaining slide friction roller coasters, and as old as it is, nothing lasts forever, as they say. So we will, hopefully I'll get back up there and maybe take a swing over to Kennywood, speaking of old coasters.
Yes, sounds good. I think the other one from the list that I would love to go check out is Ice Mountain Bobsled in Oregon, which is another one. It's at Enchanted Forest, I think it's the park that it's at. It's... I could have sworn that at some point we wrote a feature about it on the site, but I couldn't find it. But it's like a weird kind of very one-off slide friction, almost like a alpine coaster, but also like a roller coaster that it's from everything I've read about it and looking at it, it seems like there's nothing like it, at least in the United States. So that is similar reason high on my list.
It's got those weird kind of like semi-open, semi-closed cars, right?
Yeah. It's sort of like almost like the way the cars on Lost
Coasters.
Superstition. Yeah, that one has the kind of like enclosed cars, but not really kind of thing. So it's
Gotcha.
I don't know a ton about Ice Mountain Bobsled, but it certainly looks strange, and I've read good things, and I know we have some regular followers on like our Twitter that are big fans of it.
Yeah. Shane, anywhere you want to visit that you have not visited yet that's on this old coaster list?
I second the ones you guys just mentioned. I also added Thunder Run because I haven't been to Kentucky Kingdom, and I really want to get out to that park. All the rides there look really great. They've been on my list for a while, and I like the layout of Thunder Run is really great, similar to a lot of the other wooden coasters I liked. And I added Swamp Fox also because even apart from your review, Andrew, I've heard nothing but good things about it. So one day if I get down there, I would love to make the trip over there and try it out.
Shane, I'm not going to rip on you, but my favorite thing is you wanting to visit the oldest coaster in Kentucky, which is 30 years old, and it's like it's like young people thinking Blink-182 is classic rock. It's just like it's fantastic. There are also some coasters that are significantly older that did not make the older coaster list. Shane, because I ripped on you, I'm going to come back to you. What are some of your top coasters that you've ridden that are over 50 but not on the list?
So the one that came to mind was Comet at the Great Escape, which was another one similar to one of the ones you were talking about, Andrew, where it was built in 19. I think this one was 1947, and then it was moved to Six Flags Great Escape in New York, I think in the late 80s, early 90s. So I think they did some minor retracking, but other than that, the layout's pretty much unchanged. I really enjoyed that ride too. That's one of my favorite wooden coasters is Comet at Great Escape. It's got a great layout, great rough airtime, which is good, some nice ejector, and it's just a nice addition to that park that was kind of a piece of history that got saved. So I'll always be grateful for stuff like that.
Yeah, I like I'm with you on the Comet, but actually not that Comet. I was a big fan last year when I visited Waldameer on that Western Pennsylvania trip of their version of the Comet, which I'm looking at my Coaster101 calendar right now. It opened in 1951, and it's actually the coaster for August this month, so it's a handy reference. But for a park that's mainly known for Ravine Flyer 2, Comet was actually very surprised. It was very well maintained despite its age, and I really enjoyed it. It was it's a family-friendly roller coaster, and a lot like those smaller wooden roller coasters, the Woodstock Expresses of the world. It provided a very enjoyable ride for somebody who had never been to the park before. Eric, do you have any top 50 or top coasters that are 50 years old or more that are not on this list?
Yeah, so we had put together our list of our favorite 10 50-year-old coasters last year, I think. A couple others that were on that we talked about a little bit already. Jackrabbit at Kennywood, I think is a wonderful coaster. You mentioned that the double down where you basically go flying out of your seat. It's similarly, my memory is that it has a restraint that does not really restrain you at all. It's sort of a bar that comes down at maybe chest height so that you can't go flying out of the car, but you can come pretty close, which surprisingly, because of Leap the Dips, not the oldest coaster in its state, despite being 100 years old. Coney Island Cyclone at New York in New York City, I rode a few years ago.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that. I
think I maybe rode it on its 90th anniversary year, and it was really fun. I was impressed by how well maintained it felt. I love it. Still got the manual brake guy who looks like he's a New Yorker that was pulled out of the 1950s or something. Maybe 1960s. A little shady looking, but grabs onto the brake to stop it. That was really fun. And then Andrew, you mentioned the Giant Dipper in Belmont Park down in San Diego. It's a different layout than the one in Santa Cruz, and I don't think it's quite as good, but it is also for one of those things that for a coaster that's that old, I'm always impressed by how well it runs. That it's not rough, it's not doesn't feel slow. It's I think there's certainly something that in those old church designs of they knew how to design roller coasters to be fun, even without necessarily being the most intense or breaking records or anything like that. Andrew, what are some of your favorite old coasters that are not the oldest in their states?
So I gotta go with, like you mentioned, Jackrabbit. We've talked at length about Jackrabbit on this podcast. But I also really like Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland. I think it's a spiritual precursor to Expedition Everest with the Yeti, and obviously 50 plus years of technology made Expedition Everest a significantly better ride. But I don't think
their animatronic still doesn't work.
And the animatronic on the Matterhorn does work.
I was going to say
a few times. But...
Animatronics aside, Matterhorn, it's one of the first steel tube, if not the first steel tube.
I believe it's the first
tracks. Yeah. It is the first. So it sets the bar and kind of it's the predecessor for pretty much every steel roller coaster out there. So its place in history is pretty solid. I do like the little splashdown on the coaster. So that would probably be my other favorite that I've been on that is not the oldest in its state.
Yep, I would certainly second that. There are lots of people that complain about the roughness and the Matterhorn being painful. I never find it, like, it's certainly not smooth and it's got some jerky moments, but I've never felt an experience where it was like, oh, I can't ride this again. And I have very fond memories of being terrified by the animatronic snowman on the Matterhorn as a little kid. So that's it's usually one of the first things I ride when I get to Disneyland anytime now. So I am with you there.
I also I got to go back real quick. It's got the quote unquote basketball court inside it. It was Bob Gurr on the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. He kind of walked through and he signed his name on the wall, but they had the basketball court in there, and it's all this myth about, oh, there's a basketball court inside the Matterhorn bobsled. It's a hoop. It's really cool. It's really cool that it exists, but it's a basketball hoop. So it's
still kind of impressive that
it's
there's even a basketball hoop inside. Even if it's not a full NBA size regulation court.
That was going to be the West Coast bubble, was the Matterhorn basketball court.
I also, before we move on, I know that Kyle would want me to mention Comet at Hershey Park. He loved that ride, and I would second that. That's old, too. I think that was 47. That's a ride that's still in fantastic shape. And like I mentioned, it's got those restraints that give you plenty of room. And the light package on that is awesome because at night they have those tracer lights that are the bulbs. So it has that old-fashioned feel to it. And when you see it and it's packed in there with all the other rides, that one too, at a park that's so packed with other good rides, I think that one might get forgotten about. But it's definitely worth a mention because it's one of my favorite wooden coasters and still holds up all these years later.
Agree on that as well, Shane. Yeah, Comet was very fun.
Well, if you haven't yet, if you head over to Coaster101.com, on the top of the page, there is the link to the article for the oldest roller coaster in each state. Recently, another list was published, the oldest roller coaster that starts with each letter of the alphabet. We thought about talking about that tonight, but most of us have not ridden a lot of these older European coasters. I learned a lot when writing that list about parks that I'd never heard of. So check those out. That does it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Shane. As always, check us out on social media at Coaster 101, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest. We apparently have a Pinterest page. If you have any questions, comments, want to talk about old coasters, if you want to ask us a question about us or sports or roller coasters or the website or whatever to address the top of the podcast, you can follow us on social or find us on social media, as I mentioned, but you can also email podcast@coaster101.com. Quick shout out to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to you all next time. See ya.